morning, everybody. Welcome. We'll just wait a minute or two until everybody's in the room.
Hello.
Good morning. There's still a few participants joining, I see, so we're just going to give it another minute or two. We'll start shortly.
All right, I think we've got a stable number of attendees here, so welcome everyone. Christine, please go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks, Ruchia. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this information session for our new call for proposals for BioPharma. This is set up as a webinar, so if you can please all just keep yourselves muted for the moment. We're going to first be presenting the guidelines, for the two calls that we have open, and then also the budget outline. And then at the end, we will have a question and answer session during which you can then ask your questions. So if I can ask everybody to just keep their microphones muted and ideally also their videos off so that we can keep the bandwidth down. I think the panelists will try and share their videos when they are presenting, just so that you can see who we are. But other than that, for this first sort of part of the session, it would be great if we're just going to be presenting, and if everybody just mutes themselves and keeps their cameras off, that will help a lot with bandwidth. You are very welcome to, if you want to, introduce yourself in the chat. It's not compulsory, but you are very welcome to do so. If you would like to share your email or contacts or anything like that with any of the other participants, you're very welcome. Please use the chat for that function. Okay, so I'm going to begin just with a very brief introduction to BioPharma. I shift the slides, there we go. So most of you are probably familiar with BioPharma, the BioPharma Program, Biodiversity and Protected Areas Management Project. It's been running, it's now in its second phase. It's been running for since 2012, in fact. And in the second phase, we started in 2017. And the key sort of objective of BioPharma is really to support protected areas management effectiveness and governance, improving that in the region. It is an ACP program, so it covers 79 countries in the Africa, Caribbean, and Pacific. It's an initiative of the Organization of the African, Caribbean, and Pacific States, financed through the 11th European Development Fund. And the sort of focus of the BioPharma work really is around, on the one hand, sort of knowledge and information, which is what the regional observatories and the reference information systems are. In our region, the regional observatory is called the Regional Resource Hub. And then the other component, which is the action grants, which are essentially about implementing activities to actually then improve management effectiveness and governance. And underpinning both of those components of BioPharma is capacity building. So capacity building both on the data information side, but also on the management effectiveness governance side. So that's sort of just a very broad overview of BioPharma. So what we're talking about today is the action grants, so the action component of BioPharma. The overall objective of that is to improve biodiversity conservation in priority areas through funding actions on the ground. And the idea is to fund activities that have been identified systematically through diagnostic tools. So again, looking at, getting good information to inform what is needed and then acting on that. That's the principle behind it. And so that's also what you'll be hearing a little bit later when we go through the individual grant opportunities. The specific objectives of the action component are 3. The first one is around enhancing management and governance of protected and conserved areas. The second one is around strengthening the legal frameworks for effective biodiversity conservation. And the third one is around supporting local communities to enhance livelihoods are contributing to protected areas management. So it's those 3, sort of the direct management and governance, then the legal framework, and then also the local communities that are also managing biodiversity and or living on the edges of protected and conserved areas. The global budget for the action component is 21 million euros, spread across 6 regions, of which Eastern and Southern Africa has 2 parts. So Eastern Africa and Southern Africa. So we have 2 regions within our realm here. And it covers 79 of the Africa, Caribbean, and Pacific countries. We have a total of 4 different types of grants that we've launched so far. The most recent one was a small technical grants for assessment, many of which are closing at the moment. These were specifically around these diagnostic tools, assessing what the priorities are. Then we had rapid response grants, which were a response to the COVID situation. We had small technical grants, which were very specifically mostly around sort of equipment, infrastructure, and really targeting gaps of equipment and infrastructure that might be needed to increase efficiency. And the bigger ones were the medium grants. And these were essentially targeting also operations and really filling the gaps around operations within protected areas and moving them into improved effectiveness and governance areas. So for the moment, this is what it looks like. We have 42 grants active in the region, with another 5 rapid response grants that are not reflected here yet that have been approved, but that we are in the process of contracting at the moment. So we have 7 medium grants, 14 rapid response grants active, 5 small technical grants, and 16 STGAs, so small technical grants for assessment. Some of the small technical grants, some of the rapid response grants, some of the STGAs are currently also closing. They were relatively short grants, so some of them are starting to come to an end. The medium grants will probably still run for another year or 2, depending on the length of their tenure. Okay, so that was just a very, very brief introduction to the BioPharma action component as a whole. And without further ado, I am now going to move into the presentations for the 2 types of grants that we are launching. And I realize now I completely forgot to introduce myself. So my name is Christine Menzel. I am the BioPharma coordinator for the Eastern and Southern African region. And so I coordinate all the work of BioPharma in this region. And then I am now going to hand over to my colleague, Jean-Paul, who is coordinating the action component specifically, and who will also be presenting on the medium grants, which is the one call for proposals that we are presenting today. And then I will be taking over to talk to you about the small technical grants, the second type of grants that we are launching today as well. Okay, so over to you. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and hand over to Jean-Paul to share his screen and talk to us about the medium grants.
Thank you, Christine. I'm going to share my screen quickly. So, first of all, good morning, everyone. And thank you for taking the time to join us today. I'm going to speak very briefly about the call for proposal for medium grants, which we launched on Monday this week. My name is Jean-Paul Ntungane. I'm the BioPharma Action Component Officer for the Eastern and Southern Africa region. I'm responsible, like Christine said, for coordinating activities of the action component of the BioPharma program. And in this presentation, I'm going to just go over briefly over the objectives of this call for proposal for the medium grant. And we'll talk about financial allocation, the funds that are available for this call for proposal, eligibility criteria, and I will explain how to submit proposals and how we'll conduct the evaluation of proposals. And I will also show you some important dates from the launch of this call for proposal until the contracting stage. So the objective of this call for proposals for the medium grant is to enable and support community-based organizations to carry out sustainable conservation measures in protected and conserved areas, to protect species, habitat, and to improve the livelihoods of local people who depend on these protected and conserved areas. And a few things to note here is only partnership between an NGO and a community-based organization is eligible, and only actions that are addressing key management and governance issues will be eligible. Also, to let you know that the project duration of these medium grants is going to be between 12 and 24 months. So the minimum duration is 12 months, the maximum duration is 24 months. Then in terms of funds that are available, so we have a total of 2.5 million euros that is available for the whole region, Eastern and Southern Africa. And the amount of grant for this medium grant is going to be between 100,000 and 200,000 euros maximum. So project activities for this medium grant, they should be consistent, of course, with the amount that is requested. And because this is going to be partnership between community-based organization and an NGO, we will allow a maximum of 30% of the total budget to be allocated to the NGO. And we also request that between 5 and 10% of the total budget be set aside for monitoring, evaluation, and communication activities during the project implementation. Then for a medium grant proposal to be eligible, it must come from one of these 24 countries listed here. But just to highlight that 2 countries here, South Africa and South Sudan, these countries are not eligible, but activities, transboundary activities that involve these 2 countries will be eligible. This means that organizations from South Africa or South Sudan can apply only for transboundary activities, but activities within South Africa or within South Sudan only will not be eligible. Also to mention that these countries that you see in red, these are the countries where organizations from OECD member countries will not be eligible to apply because these are not part of the least developed countries. So organizations that are from OECD member countries will not be eligible to apply in these countries in red. Then, like I said, so for these medium grants, we will be funding a partnership between community-based organization and NGOs. So we are targeting community-managed or co-managed protected and conserved areas. And this means that community-based organizations or NGOs cannot apply to this medium grant individually. They must apply jointly. They must form a partnership to be able to apply for these medium grants. So also international NGOs, they can apply. They can submit a joint application with a community-based organization, provided that they have been working with the CBO. They know very well the CBO. They know the needs of this CBO. So yeah, we require that they must demonstrate that they have been working with the CBO for at least 3 years. And both the NGO and the CBO must be registered legal entities, of course, and they should be non-profit making organizations. Then particularly for the lead applicant, which is going to be an NGO, the lead applicant must submit the application with only one CBO, one community-based organization as co-applicant. So we will not allow more than one CBO to be in this partnership. And the lead applicant, meaning the NGO, must be responsible for developing and submitting the proposal, while at the same time developing capacity of the CBO. The lead applicant also must be responsible for supporting the implementation and reporting requirement of the grant throughout the entire duration of the project, if successful. So, and also the lead applicant must clearly describe in the proposal how the CBO in partnership will be accompanied and benefit from the NGO expertise. The lead applicant also, it's important to mention that the lead applicant, of course, will be the signatory of the grant agreement. The lead applicant may also apply to up to 2 medium grants. We will allow a submission of up to 2 medium grants from the same NGO, but only 1 grant will be awarded. And also in terms of activities, for activities to be eligible, these activities must be located. So the project must be located in at least one or several priority areas. So by priority areas, we mean protected and or conserved areas, key biodiverse areas, key landscape for conservations, this type of areas. And also these activities, I mean, they must address clearly formulated priorities that have been identified through the use of quantitative diagnostic tools or quantitative assessment tools. For example, IMET tool, MET, RAPAM, Green List for the protected area management effectiveness, or tools like SAGE or SAPA for the governance assessment. So this is very important. So for the activities to be eligible, one must demonstrate that these activities have been, addressing priorities which have been identified through these assessment tools. The activities also must be consistent with the Biopharma Action Component objectives, those 3 objectives that Christine has mentioned around, enhancing management and governance of protected areas. Also around, improving legal framework that supports conservation, and around livelihood of local communities living within or around protected areas. So also, the proposal must, implement concrete conservation activities on the ground and achieve tangible results measured through clearly identified indicators. Proposals must have clear indicators, and also activities must comply with the IUCN Environmental and Social Management System, ESMS. These are just some of the examples of activities that are eligible for the medium grants. So activities around protected and conserved areas planning and management, activities that are aimed at strengthening governance and equitable management models that are in place, law enforcement activities, including wildlife trafficking controls, activities that are aimed at strengthening institutional and legal frameworks in place. For conservation activities that are focusing on threat mitigation in these priority areas, including measures to combat illegal wildlife trade at community level. Also, activities that are focusing on climate change mitigation, resilience, and adaptation strategies in priority areas. Another example is activities that are aiming at improving sustainable livelihoods of local communities, vulnerable peoples, and indigenous communities living in these priority areas. These are just some of the examples. And also, it is important to mention these activities which are not eligible under this call. So activities that support third parties through sub-grants. Sub-granting mechanism is not eligible. Activities are around purchasing of land or involuntary resettlement of people. Those kind of activities are not eligible. Activities on indigenous lands or territories without their free, prior, and informed consent. These activities will not be eligible. Removal or alteration of any physical cultural property. For example, in sites with the ecological, paleontological, historical values, these activities will not be eligible. Also, activities that may affect vulnerable groups within local communities or indigenous people, activities with regard to procurement, handling, storage, and use of unlawful pesticides, activities that duplicate the work that has been previously funded by BioPharma. All these types of activities will not be eligible. Then just briefly in terms of cost, so the cost for these medium grants, of course, must be necessary for the implementation of the activities. They must be linked, clearly linked to project activities, must be reasonable, justified, and must be generated during the project duration, not before the project start or after the end of the project. And the grantees, of course, will need to adhere to procurement policy and procedures for BioPharma grant recipients. Then also, just to show, in terms of how to apply for these medium grants, so all applications must be submitted through the BioPharma Action Component online portal. I've just through this website, action.biopharma.org. That is where we have the portal for submission. So we will not allow applications by email, only through the portal. And for that, applicants need to create an account, and they will be able to fill in the concept note, and will be able to upload it on the portal and submit. There is also an option to save a draft as you work on your application, and submit it once the application is complete. So also it's important to mention that once you've submitted your concept or your full proposal, you will not be able to modify the application. Also, if you already have a user profile, like you've applied before, you can still use the same user profile to submit a new application for this medium grant. And also important to mention that even though we've launched the call for proposal, the detailed information about this call for proposals is available on the Action Component website, but we will allow submission of applications from 14th of March and it's going to be between 14th of March and 27th of March. So during this period, you can work, of course, on the applications, start working offline on the applications, but then you'll be able to submit from the 14th of March. And yeah, proposals in both English or French will be accepted. So we have templates for the concept notes. We have templates for the full proposals. We have very detailed guidelines, like I just mentioned. And all these are available on the Action Component website. And like I was saying, so interested applicant can already start working on the concept note as you wait for the 14th of March when submission will be opened. So the application process for this medium grant is going to be a two-step application process. So applicants will first be required to submit a concept note. Then we will review the concept note and successful concept note. Applicant, we will notify them so that they can proceed with working on a full application. So at this concept stage, documents that are required here are listed here. So it's a concept technical proposal, kind of summary of activities, objectives of your proposal, activities, the approach in a summarized way. Then you will also be required to provide a full assessment report that support, that justify those priorities that you are working to address. Also, you will be required to submit the applicant and co-applicant signed declarations, a letter of support from relevant national authorities, due diligence questionnaire, and other necessary supporting documents to this due diligence. And we will also require that you submit a simplified ESMS questionnaire. I will come back to this ESMS later. Then at the full proposal stage, that is when applicant will be asked to submit a full technical proposal plus a detailed budget. So like you've seen at the concept stage, we are not asking for a budget, just to at the concept stage, in the concept note, you will just mention the amount that you are requesting, but then a detailed budget is not required. You will be asked to submit a detailed budget at the full stage. At the full stage also, a detailed project logical framework will be required. And again, applicant and co-applicant signed declarations. And a full ESMS questionnaire with supporting documents will be required at the full proposal stage. Then in terms of deadlines, so the deadline to submit the concept note, like I mentioned, is on the 27th of March. And for the successful concept note, the deadline to submit a full proposal will be on the 15th of May. Also, yeah, to mention that we have a page on the Action Component website with frequently asked questions. So if you have questions, you can first check this page, and then if you still have questions, please feel free to submit your questions on this email, biopharma.esc.esa@iucn.org, and we will answer your questions between 14th and 22nd of March during the submission period. Then in terms of evaluation of concept note applications, so the review and the whole contracting process from the time that concept is submitted to the signing of grant agreement, this period is expected to take a maximum of 4 months following the deadline of the call for proposals. And then the concept note, at the concept note, we will do what we call administrative check. So we will check the concept in terms of whether they have met the deadline, they have provided all required documents, whether proposed activities are eligible, and then concepts note that pass the administrative check will be evaluated in more details by experts. So this is a team of our regional advisory committee, plus IUCN staff and EU delegation staff. So then at the full proposal, the budget cannot vary from the initial estimate by more than 20%. So if you, from the amount that is requested at the concept stage, that cannot be increased or decreased by 20% at the full proposal stage. And also activities that are outlined in the concept note, also they may not be modified in the full application. So environmental and social management system, this is also very important. So all BioPharma funded projects, they must comply with the IUCN environmental and social management system. And that means that all projects are checked for their potential environmental and social impacts to ensure that negative impacts are avoided or they are minimized to the extent possible, while positive impacts are stimulated. So at the concept stage, applicants will be required to answer only 5 ESMS preliminary questions. So this kind of simplified ESMS questionnaire to help us identify any potential environmental or social risk of the project. And if the proposal is selected and the risks have been identified, so the applicant will be requested to submit a dedicated environmental and social management system ESMS questionnaire, a full questionnaire at the full proposal stage. And these are just some of the important dates for this call for proposals. So like I mentioned, on the 14th of March, applicants will be allowed to submit the applications. And during this period, applicant can send queries by email until the 22nd of March. That is the deadline. Then the deadline for concept submission is on the 27th of March. Then from the 17th of March, we will conduct our internal and expert concept review. We review the concept and we will notify applicants on the 27th of April. And deadline for full proposal submission is on the 15th of May. And also we conduct again our internal and expert evaluation of full proposals on the 29th of May. And we will notify successful and successful full proposals applicants from the 6th of June. And we expect to sign grants for this medium grant from the 27th of June. So just to show you the page of the BioPharma action component website. So from here, if you have not yet seen this page before, this is where you will sign up to create an account for you to be able to submit an application. So thank you very much for your attention. I will now hand over back to Christine. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jean-Paul. And I see the Q&A has also been quite busy while Jean-Paul has been talking. I hope that we've answered most of your questions there already. I've tried as much as possible to give you answers there. Please do put your questions into the Q&A, not into the chat, because in the chat they get lost. So in the Q&A we can track and we can much more easily answer them. So please, if you have a written question, please use the Q&A. So you can just, those of you that have put questions in the chat, just copy and paste them into the Q&A, please. Then we, the colleagues that are on the call here can respond to them. Maybe also just to say that Jean-Paul had talked about the ESMS. We will be having a dedicated session on the ESMS sometime later in March. So for those of you that are keen to just learn more about what that involves for IUCN, if you're not that familiar yet, you will hear about the session, and you're obviously very welcome to then join that session as well. Yeah, so for this, as Jean-Paul was saying, for this concept phase of the medium grant, it's 6 main questions, but you are obviously also welcome to ask us if there's anything that's not clear. Jean-Paul gave you the window for asking questions. You obviously will still have an opportunity at the end of this call. Yes, so I think that's all I wanted to say. Please put your questions into the Q&A. Right, I'm going to move over into the small technical grants presentation now. And And just to say, please then, any questions that we haven't answered in the Q&A, please just note them down. We will be able to then at the end open the microphone so that you can ask them directly. Let me share my screen. Just give me a second here. All right, I hope that you can now see my screen, full screen. Okay, so I'm going to follow a relatively similar approach to what Jean-Paul did. So the outline of the presentation is in this very similar format. Many of the more sort of administrative requirements are very similar for both of these calls. So I'm going to fly through some of them because Jean-Paul has explained them in detail. So things like the country eligibility, etc. But for this small technical grant call, we are focusing really on supporting more the sort of strategic framework for management effectiveness, governance, sustainable financing, and also other effective area-based conservation measures. So the idea is here, we're responding with this small technical grant is responding mostly to the second objective of the action component, which is around the sort of legal and policy framework that allows improvements in management effectiveness and governance. So this is aimed not at the site level per se, but really more at the development of national and or regional policies and strategies that are basically using the evidence from the ground to potentially make changes or develop approaches at national level or regional level on these topics that I mentioned. So basically, this is more of a, as it says, small technical grant, small grant. The duration is also therefore only 12 months. And the focus areas, as I mentioned, is really around those four main topics: sustainable financing, equitable governance, management effectiveness, and also this topic of OECMs, other effective area-based conservation measures. And the intention really is to support countries to consolidate their approaches at national level around these topics. The financial allocation for the small technical grants is then also much smaller. So we have just under 400,000 euro that is available for these grants. And each grant will be between 20,000 and 50,000 euros. So small grant, as we said. And the intention really is here that this is more of a process support for policy development, strategy development, rather than action on the ground in particular. So these small technical grants are very particular around this policy issue. There's no co-financing required, but the proposed activities obviously must still be consistent with the amount that's requested. And similar to the medium grants, again, we are requesting that you take into account 5 to 10% of the total project costs around, in particular, communication activities and possibly also setting up monitoring evaluation around the implementation of this grant. But the main one here is really the communications, because if you are developing a strategy around an approach, for example, for sustainable financing in a particular country, for a network of protected areas, for example, you'd also want to build in the communication about making sure all the stakeholders are aware of what this policy document says, et cetera, et cetera. So that's part of the reason why we're doing that. And also because it is a requirement within BioPharma that we communicate about the grants and about the impact of the grants. So please keep that in mind when you are putting your budgets together. This is the same as for the medium grants. So again, these are the countries that are eligible in principle. South Africa, South Sudan are exempt from that. And again, only in terms of transboundary activities can be involved. And similarly, I think we may have a question still about the red countries and what exactly this means on the OECD member countries. So the countries themselves are eligible to apply for grants. It is the organizations from OECD member countries that are not able to apply for the countries that are marked in red. I hope that's a little bit clearer, but we can also try and explain that in more detail if it's still not clear. But that is the eligibility here. So in principle, all the countries are eligible, barring South Sudan, South Africa, that are only eligible in transboundary types of scenarios. And then there is a constraint on organizations from OECD member countries and which countries they can then apply for. Okay, eligible actors. So again, linked to the purpose of this grant, then obviously the actors here are not necessarily site level. So we're not looking at single protected or conserved areas, but rather networks of protected areas, clusters at either a national or a regional level. That is one sort of set of actors that is eligible to apply, or national civil society organization, national NGOs, national authorities or agencies established in targeted eligible countries. So any of those are eligible to apply. The key condition here is that all applications must be supported by the relevant national authorities. So for example, if you are applying to look at a policy or an approach around management effectiveness in a particular country, at least the Protected Areas Authority or a relevant authority, ministry must provide a letter of support if they are not the ones applying themselves. So it needs to be anchored in the national approaches as well. That's what we're trying to achieve with this request of saying that it needs to be supported by the relevant national authorities. So it cannot, for example, it cannot be an NGO that's decided country X needs a policy on governance when there's no involvement at all of the government or other relevant stakeholders in that discussion. So that application needs to reflect that there is a partnership happening, even if the NGO is the one that is applying for the funds and is going to be managing the project. That's how this is essentially set up. So eligible activities, as I said, the focus of the activities must be on the development of national or regional policies, strategies, and actions. And importantly, it also should include the validation of these. So again, this is quite an important component. If it is around a policy that has to be formally approved within the government structures, then obviously that there needs to be a consideration for the time that takes, because the validation of the policy has to be part of the project timeline as well. For strategies or plan, sort of strategies or work plans, action plans, that might be a little bit easier because the stakeholders that need to validate these might have a slightly less protracted mechanism in which they can validate these strategies. So that's quite important to just note here, is that it's about the development of the strategies, policies, etc., but also the validation of that. So at the end of the project, we need the respective document, but also the validation of that. And then obviously, just to address the clearly formulated priorities, if there is a diagnostic tool that supports this, so in some countries, some countries might have used something like the RAPAM, which is a network assessment, a rapid assessment of a whole network of protected areas. In that instance, you might want to provide the results of that RAPAM as a support for what you're proposing in the proposal. But in this case, it's not compulsory. We do want a strong justification that outlines how this was identified as a priority, but we are not requiring a diagnostic tool at a site level, because that doesn't make sense. But if you have a network level report, then obviously that will strengthen the proposal substantively. Then also your proposal must be consistent with BioPharma Action Component objectives, in particular the second one, as I mentioned. So please just look at those again and make sure that that is the case. And then we do also want to encourage the sharing of outcomes, in particular of this grant, with the regional observatory. So in this case, the Regional Resource Hub, because these kinds of policies and strategies should be in the public domain and should be then made available through the Regional Resource Hub as well. Ineligible activities, this is essentially the same as what Jean-Paul went through for the medium grants. I'm not going to go through them again. They are detailed in the guidelines, so you can read them up, but they are the same as for the medium grants. The application process for the small technical grant is quite similar to the medium grant. So again, it's through the portal, and similar to what Jean-Paul had mentioned earlier, the portal will open for online submission only on the 14th of March. So don't be surprised if you are trying to get into the portal now, you will not be able to right now. You can access all the guidelines and the templates on the website. So you are, as Jean-Paul was saying, you can work offline from now on your proposal. Everything that you will need to provide in the portal, you can already read up what's required in the guidelines. So you are able to fully start working on your proposal right now, but the portal will only open from the 14th of March. So you will only be able to start putting your documents online after the 14th of March. So if you haven't already, you will need to create an account, as Jean-Paul was saying earlier, and then you can complete your application offline for the moment, and then upload it as soon as the portal is open. And of course, please also remember to upload all the supporting documents that are required, and I'll get to that just now. And similarly to what Jean-Paul was saying now, you can save a draft and you can keep working on it in the second half of March before the deadline for submission, and just save the draft. But once you actually submit the application, then you cannot modify it anymore. So please be careful and make sure that when you are ready to submit, everything is there, because if you do submit, you can't modify it. And it may mean that you have to then start all over again if there's something that you missed. So please just save the draft, and then you can keep working on that and only submit right when you have everything updated there. And similarly, applications can be done in both English and French, and the portal will be open from 14th of March, as I said. So in the case of the small technical grants, this is a one-step process. Okay, so unlike what you've just heard about the medium grants, in this case, you are putting together a full proposal at this stage already. Part of the reason for that is because it is not a very complicated proposal. It is not a very big grant, so we're not asking huge amounts of requirements, which means that we feel that the time available is sufficient to actually put in a full proposal. So we would like this to be a one-step process. You are submitting a full proposal. The template requests all the information that will be needed for a full proposal. And then all the supporting documentation will also have to be submitted at this deadline. So the deadline for the small technical grants is the 10th of April. And I'll come to the timelines at the end again, like Jean-Paul did too. But just so that you know, the small technical grants, a full proposal with all supporting documents must be submitted in its completeness by the deadline of the 10th of April, 2022. And what is required specifically is the technical proposal. So the template will be available to you. You need to complete all the sections. And on that point, I just want to make a brief comment. Please do read the questions in the proposal template and try and answer those questions as best you can. And the more information you can provide us, try and be as clear as possible. Imagine that we don't have a clue about what's going on in your country, about the background. So you need to explain it quite clearly so that somebody that is not involved as deeply as you might be in your country in this topic can also understand exactly what you are wanting to, what the background is and what you're wanting to do. So please rather say a sentence or two more than a sentence or two less. We have often seen proposals that are very short, and it's really difficult then to understand exactly what the applicants are trying to do. And that makes it really difficult also for the evaluation of the proposal. So please, if I can ask, I mean, obviously don't write pages and pages, but try and be as clear as possible. Make sure all the pertinent information is in your proposal. And read the questions that we put there. They do help you to try and formulate a response, essentially, that will help us then evaluate your proposal. So it's the technical proposal we're looking for. Then, as an optional, as I said, an assessment report, full assessment report. In this case, If it helps, for example, we know that in one of the countries in our region, there was a whole bunch of assessments done in forest reserves, for example, and there's like a series that can be used as a supporting document for a proposal if needed. Or, as I mentioned as well, there might be a RAPAM, which is a network assessment already available, etc. Or you might just have several assessments within the country of different sites that also will strengthen your proposal. So any of that kind of thing, please do provide it as additional support. It's not compulsory on this one, but it does help the application if it's easy to see how what's come out of assessments is feeding into your technical proposal here. Applicant and co-applicant signed declarations, that's the same as for the medium grants. Then, as I mentioned, a letter of support from the relevant national authorities, a due diligence questionnaire and all the supporting documents that are related to the due diligence, a simplified ESMS questionnaire. In this case, you will need to also provide a full budget and a logical framework. So the next presentation after me is going to be briefly about the budget, the budget for this small technical grant. So we will go through what's required in that. But because this is a one-step process, we will need a full budget from you on application, and we will also need a logical framework from you in this step as well. Okay, so the review and contracting process is expected to take around 3 months from the deadline of the call for proposals. Again, there will be an administrative check in the beginning. So whether you've met the deadline, whether the relevant supporting documentation, in this case, sorry, this assessment report, please ignore that. That's optional in this case. I should have put that in brackets. But any supporting documentation around the focus of your grant, then your eligibility and the due diligence supporting documents, the log frame, the budget. If any of those documents are missing, that is a disqualification from further assessment. So please make sure that you really look through and make sure that you've uploaded all the documents that are required. And then we will move, once the administrative check is passed and all the documents that are required are there, then we will have the technical evaluation, which is according to the evaluation form. And you can see this evaluation form and the criteria we'll be using in the guidelines. So have a look at that as well, and then that'll give you a bit of an idea of what we will be looking at in the evaluation of the small technical grants. Okay, and then lastly, this is just again to give you a sense. Sorry, I've been saying the portal's opening on the 14th of March, but I see here it's the 21st of March. Maureen, can I just confirm this with you, please? The 21st of March is the opening of the portal for the small technical grants?
It can. The portal will be open on the 14th of March for the medium grants. So we can also open it on the 14th for this SDG call or on the 21st.
Okay, so I think then it would be good if we can open it on the 14th of March for both types of proposals. Just on that note, please be sure that you also select the right kind of grant to apply for. Obviously, we're opening both of these calls at the same time, so just be very clear which one you're applying for and make sure that you're then following the guidelines for those for that particular grant. They are quite different, so it's not that hard, but I just want to mention it here. And then the deadline for requesting clarifications is on the 5th of April. So you can email us in the interim any questions that you have, but by the 5th of April, we will, after the 5th of April, we won't be able to answer questions anymore. The deadline for the actual submission is the 10th of April, as I mentioned before. And then by the 6th of June, we will have done the reviews, and you should be hearing from us from the 13th of June. You will be notified on successful and unsuccessful proposals. And then after that, we will be moving into the contracting phase. And between sort of middle of June and end of July, we hope to finalize all the documents for the contracting. Okay, and then again, just the website, that's the important one to note. And with that, I'm going to close and I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I will be handing over to my colleague, I think Hans Raj, who will be showing you the budget template for the small technical grant. Thank you. Over to you, Hans-Raj.
Thank you very much, Christine. So a quick introduction. My name is Hans-Raj Woodraj. I'm the finance officer for BioPharma in the Eastern and Southern Africa region, and I'm based in Pretoria, South Africa. So I'm going to present the budget shortly, but before the budget, I'm just going to present a couple of slides just to give you some key information that's going to help you when completing this budget. So I hope my slides are clear. So
yes, we can see them.
thank you. So yeah, with regards to the financial, we want the budget to be cost effective and clear. And in the template, there is a justification tab, and this is mandatory. Why we ask for the justification of costs, because they need to link to your proposal and your intended activities. So when you do fill in a cost in the budget template, ensure that you complete necessary justification so we are aware of the costs and what they link to. And the budget of the small technical grants is based on reimbursement of actual cost and simplified cost option where appropriate or combination of thereof. I will explain simplified cost option and real cost option in detail. No co-financing is required for the small technical grants. Most importantly, financial support to third parties, sub-granting is not allowed in this case. And the small technical grants, so the amounts are from a minimum of 20,000 euros to a maximum of 50,000 euros. And within this grant, there are indirect costs and it's capped at 7%. So just some eligible costs. So you are eligible for personnel costs. This is actually based on a flat rate. We will explain that when we present the budget. You will have a travel and subsistence section, costs and services, and then another section which is M&E, communication activities, and so on. Just to note, there are non-eligible costs, so please refrain from putting this into your budget. And these are basically debts and debt services, which are interest, provision for losses or potential future liabilities, costs declared and financed by another action or work program, purchases of land or buildings, in-kind contribution, exchange losses due to currency, credit to third parties, and any costs leading to personal or private profit. So just a breakdown of the costs. So there's real cost options where you enter your estimated costs into the budget. Reimbursement is then based on actual costs, and these are subject to stringent financial reporting guidelines. Every euro funded expenditure requires supporting documents. So the real cost section of the budget will require supporting documents when you are reporting. And then we have the simplified cost option, and this is built into the budget template. And simplified cost option applies to personnel costs, and this is fixed at 10%. So this 10% then depends on your other budgeted figures and other budgeted sections. So that's it for now. I'm going to then switch over to the budget template. So this is basically your budget template for the small technical grant. And before you sort of begin with this, we have provided a budget example. So it's good to have a look at the budget example, and it would give you an overview of what is essentially required. So for example, for international travel, you complete the units, your estimated unit value, and then a justification of the costs. So in this case, you will justify all your costs, and you have your other category, which is costs and services. Depending on the cost of services, you can insert additional lines into this template as well, depending on your needs. So for example, you can have publications, you plan to do 2, your unit cost, and then you give us a brief justification. And then we mentioned personnel costs. So this is based on a simplified cost option, which is a flat rate over subtotals 2, 3, and 4. So based on what you have budgeted in these sections, you will then get 10% of that to cover staff time for your staff involved in the project. And then we've included indirect costs, which is a maximum of 7% of these sections here as well. And this 7% covers any other costs that you did not budget for or did not plan for, and it's actually explained in detail in your guidelines what's covered here. So again, please ensure that you read the instructions. So again, the most important thing is it's a minimum of 20,000 and a maximum of 50,000. Insert your project proposal number generated by the system. So when you start your application, you would get a project proposal number, and you would enter your project proposal number here in this column. So for example, SDG 1234, this will be a way of identifying you by your application number. Period of implementation. So we say that these can have a duration of up to 12 months. So you insert the period of implementation. So your intended start date and your intended end date, and it can be a maximum of 12 months. And it should be in euro. The template is in euro. So costs and unit values are rounded to the nearest euro. And then it explains how the personnel costs are calculated. Again, please reinforce your descriptions, be as descriptive as possible in your lines. So international travel, you can insert description to say what it's for. Local travel, it can be travel to the field. Per diems, again, what it's for. Just be descriptive as possible, so it helps us a lot. And very important, project proposals are requested to set aside 5 to 10% of total project cost to monitoring, evaluation, and communication activities. So please ensure you budget for that. And yes, very important, once you complete your budget, fill in the justification. So that's it in terms of the budget example, the budget template, and a bit of eligible costs. If you have any questions, you can type them in the chat and we'll be happy to answer. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you very much, Hansraj. Okay, that's been enough talking from our side. And as I said earlier, we've been trying to answer most of your questions in the Q&A as you've put them in there. But I do want to now open the floor. And if I can request you to just raise your hand, you can see there should be a raise hand button at the bottom of your screen or somewhere on your screen. And so if you can just raise your hand, if you do want to ask a question in person, any questions of clarity, etc. Please also do have a look at what has been asked in the Q&A, because a lot of questions have come through there and we have tried to answer those as best possible. Nonetheless, the floor is open. Please feel free to pose your questions here. Okay, and while I don't see any hands yet, but while we wait, I'll also just note that we have been recording this session, and we will be putting the recording of the session onto the website where the calls for proposals are as well. So you can also go back, have another look at it. We will also be posting well, you will also have access to the guidelines, and you'll be able to sort of review those. Okay, I see two hands. So Justin, please unmute yourself. Go ahead and ask your question.
Good morning, all. It's Justin from Bahari High Conservation CBO. Just a question on the CBO 3-year track record, which I see Ahmed Yassin also asked in the chat. So our particular instance, the CBO is around 1 year old, but we have over 15 years of the same team working in the same area and with the NGO we would like to partner with. Is it a possibility for us to send in some sort of motivation about the unique sort of situation we have with this CBO? And would that allow us to then meet the criteria for the 3-year track record?
Thanks, Justin. Yes, I think it would be useful to send an in. Obviously, if the CBO has only been existing for a year, that is a bit different. I'm assuming that what you're saying is that potentially the team that's working with them has also helped to actually get them this far. So perhaps there's an option to show that, that actually the work with what is now the CBO has actually been going on even before that, even if the actual formal entity of the CBO is only valid since a year ago. So yes, I think that is a possibility. I'm going to just sort of quickly look at other colleagues if anybody has anything else to add on that from my colleagues, any other constraints that you see. But from my side, I would say that we can consider that. I would suggest that you, as I say, show, potentially that road, because it sounds like even before the legal entity of CBO, there has been joint work. And so it would be good to try and show that.
All right, thank you.
Okay, I don't see, Jean-Paul, did you want to add something?
No, I think it is important to show that, even before CBO was formally created, that at least you had some sort of relationship with them, you know them very well. Yeah, because a minimum of 3 years of collaboration is a requirement.
Yeah. So the principle behind this, maybe if I can just focus on that again, the principle behind this is that because of what we're trying to do here is to say that a lot of what we've heard in the region is that the community-based organizations are often there, but they are requiring some support in particular around managing some of these large grants. So what we're trying to do here with the NGO and the CBO partnership is that the NGO is building capacity of the CBO, continues to build capacity in the CBO to be able to manage these kinds of grants as well. There is an assumption obviously behind that, but it's what we've been hearing from the region that this is what might be needed. And that's the principle behind it. So obviously what doesn't work, and this is why we are requiring this 3-year collaboration horizon, is it doesn't really work if an NGO is looking for a new CBO to work with, and they're only just starting this collaboration right now, because the focus of the work is what needs to happen in the site. So the work in the site is the focus of the proposal. The NGO-CBO collaboration is the capacity building component and is basically just supporting the CBO, not only in implementing the work, but also in managing grants of this type. And as many of you will know, the EU requirements for grants are not trivial. And so it is important that we build capacity. So IUCN, our grants unit, is doing that continuously as well. But at the same time, we feel that an entity also supporting a community-based organization in doing that is important in this construct. And if we do that, it needs to be a partnership that is already existing and is strong already. That's the principle, just to sort of explain that a little bit more. I hope that clarifies it a little bit better as well. Ahmed.
Yeah, thank you for the clarification, Christine, but it's still on the same line. For example, we were working with a CBO since 2019, and currently we are in the same working relationship and planning together on a marine protection area in Zeila area in Somalia, Somaliland. So my question is, however, the number of years is, it's not full 3 years, it's like 4 or 5 months less. So will still qualify applying together? And then my other second question is, what can a local NGO and international NGO working in the same area on the marine protection, can they also qualify to apply together, a local NGO and an international NGO? Thank you very much, Christine and team.
Thanks, Ahmed. Okay, on your first one, it's a bit of a tricky one because we did have to put a bit of a line in the sand. I would, from my side, I would say that it's still worth sort of really making the case. 4 or 5 months short doesn't sound like much. I think, again, the principle is that we're looking for a stronger relationship. I don't know, Jean-Paul, I'm going to sort of hand it over to you. I mean, we are looking at a 3-year horizon, and that was what we kind of felt that was a good amount of time for a good relationship to exist between the two entities, and that's where that comes from. But I guess the question is, would we be willing to, on a case-by-case basis, look at a proposal that is slightly short of the 3 years? So, Jean-Paul, I'm going to just ask and get your...
No, I think I'm willing to really look at these case by case, like you said.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think it will still worth it just to make a case for this. If it's only a few months short of these 3 years, I think you can look at that and see if, of course, the justification of your partnership is strong, then I think it should be fine.
Yeah. Thanks, Jean-Paul. So, Ahmed, the strength of the partnership is the principal important thing here. And we've sort of put a bit of a line in the sand saying that 3 years seems like a good amount of time to be able to build a strong relationship. So I think from our perspective, we would say, please do go ahead and just make sure that you justify clearly that strength of the relationship between the two entities that are applying. The second question you had about the NGO and the international NGO, I'm not quite sure which one of the two grants you're referring to. Well, I guess you're referring to the medium grant. The question is, would it be 3 partners then? Would it be a community-based organization together then with a local NGO and an international NGO? Or are you saying it's the local NGO that is the community-based organization in this instance? Can you clarify that perhaps?
Thank you, Christine. Yes, I am saying one local NGO, one international NGO, and one CBO.
Okay. Jean-Paul, look at you again. I think in principle that should be fine. It's just then obviously the main work and the main focus is the CBO. But Jean-Paul, do you want to comment on that?
Yes. So yeah, we need to understand like the scope and mission for this local NGO. If it's really focusing on communities, it's local, has a local focus only, then it would qualify, I think, as a community-based organization in that category. So that partnership, I think we can allow it.
I agree. I think the key would be to really be clear about what role each of those are playing, right? Because the reason for the NGO in this partnership is really that component of supporting the management of the grant and supporting the CBO to be able to respond to all the requirements of the project management side of things. So then, you would have to just be very clear on what role is the international NGO playing, what role is the local NGO playing, and then what role is the community-based organization playing. Does that help you, Ahmed?
Yes, thank you very much, Christine and Jean-Paul. Thank you very much.
Great. All right, I don't see any other hands. So maybe just to say again, you are very welcome to reach out on email. We have said that the guidelines are up on the website for the medium grants. The small technical grants should be up there by the end of this week as well. The medium grants are there already. And I think that's what a lot of you are interested in, the medium grants. So that information is all up on the website already in both French and in English. So please make sure that you look for the Eastern and Southern African one though, because there's also information available for West and Central Africa and for the Pacific, but the grants are very different. or potentially different between the regions. So please make sure that you are looking for the Eastern and Southern African medium grant call.
There were a couple new hands up, Christine.
Oh, okay. I'm not
but they
seeing
put them
now.
down. Could you put your hands please up again? So Samson and who
Yeah,
was the
Ahmed,
other
I
one?
think you have your hand up still. So Samson, please go ahead. Samson, are you there? If you can unmute yourself, you can ask your question.
Okay. Do you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah, my question is, does a public institution or government institution are eligible to apply in this call? They are not CBOs, but they are working on biodiversity conservation.
So which call in particular? The medium grant or the small technical grant?
The medium grant, already the currently opened one.
Okay. Jean-Paul, can I throw this one at you? I guess it depends again on what relationship there is, because the focus again of the work is on community managed or co-managed areas. So if the legal entity, the government entity is the one that is the co-manager with the community, it might be eligible. Jean-Paul, your thoughts on this?
Yes, no, I agree with you, Christine. So like I mentioned, so we are targeting a community-based, community managed or co-managed site. So yeah, if it is government, if it's a government institution that is working with this CBO as co-managers, then in that case, you can apply.
Yeah, maybe also again, just to highlight that the reason we are going for a partnership on the medium grants is again, because we have sort of the feedback from the region is that in many cases, there's a lot of need and requirement for work in community managed and co-managed areas, but then the sort of structures that exist in those areas may not be strong enough yet to manage a grant like this. So hence we are saying that we're looking at partnerships so there's one partner that has the capacity to manage these kinds of grants and would be mentoring and supporting the community to implement, the community-based organization to implement the grant. That is the principle that we're following here. So as we're saying now, Samson, if there's a co-management between a government entity and a community, then in some sense, the government entity would be playing that mentoring role to help the community organization implement on the ground. So I think, again, we'd have to look at it case by case. It's a bit difficult to really answer that question very specifically now. And if you like, we can talk through it in a separate call in more detail, and you can just provide us with a whole bunch more detail, and then we can maybe work out what's possible and what's not. But in principle, it should be possible. It's really just the focus is, as I've just explained. Okay, there was another hand, but I see it's disappeared now. Christine, please go ahead. If you can unmute yourself, please go ahead and ask your question. Christine Baggio. You will still need to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can.
I'm not Christine Baggio. I'm working with her, but yes. So my question is, it's to complete the question before. It's about the public organization who could be or not co-appliant with the NGO. The example I will give is to illustrate this case. For the BioPharma calls before, we've done assessment with a public organization with the method of SAGE assessment. And this public organization is is a public cooperation between municipalities, and they co-managed with CBOs the areas, natural resources and areas, protected area. So we would like to apply with this public organization, but this public organization is closely work and co-manage the protected area with a CBO. And this CBO is used to work close to this public organization too, and with us. So I suppose, as you said, we just have to explain clearly what is the rules of each actors in the grounds. Is that right?
Yes, I would suggest that is how you do it. I think also the thing to keep in mind is obviously the more entities you have in the grant, the less money actually makes it to the ground. So I think that's just something to also keep in mind when you are just very clear about who plays exactly what role. But in principle, it would be possible. I think the key here is the proposal itself is about the work on the ground in the community managed or co-managed area. That's the core of the proposal. And the NGO, international NGO, other entities that are supporting, their role is clearly in support of that work and in support of that community-based organization. And so that would be what you need to really clarify exactly what role each of those entities will be playing. I hope that's clear. Okay, I don't see any other hands. So as I was saying, I do see there are still some questions in the Q&A. I think we will continue to try and answer those. I can't unfortunately talk and answer at the same time. So we will have a look at what they are, and we will try and still answer those. Let me just actually maybe have a quick look through if there's any that we can answer verbally here. Okay, so Samson, we've answered yours. NGO. Okay, NGO can apply for up to 2 medium grants as a lead applicant to this call for proposals. Only 1 grant can be awarded. Does this relate across all medium grants, Eastern, Southern Africa, and West and Central African call, or just each one individually? That's a very good question. I would actually look to my colleagues to see if they can answer that. I mean, for us, we are saying in our region, Eastern and Southern Africa, we would likely only award 1 grant per organization, just because, and again, the principle, I'll explain it to you. The principle is really that we also want as many entities as possible to benefit from the call for proposals. So we don't want, you know, one or 2 large organizations sort of getting most of the grants. That's not the idea behind this. So I don't know if maybe Roxana or Marine, you want to comment on whether this also extends to West and Central Africa. I'm assuming that you're talking about international NGOs that in many cases have local entities. If that is the case, if it's a local office, a local NGO applying with a CBO in a particular country, I think that it is treated slightly differently. What we don't want is one NGO applying across the region in all the different countries, and that's where all the money goes. So yeah, I don't know, Roxana, Marine, do you have any thoughts on that? Whether West and Central Africa is also included, or whether that's treated as a separate region?
No, I agree with what you mentioned. I think the idea is that they can apply to up to 2, but as you mentioned, as we're trying to spread the impact and try to touch on as many geography and organization as possible, I think we will also prioritize diversity in terms of where we put the grants.
Yeah. So maybe just to ask, I can't see who asked this question, but perhaps put this question into an email to us as well, and we can also liaise with the West and Central African region again, just to double check on this and confirm with you. So if I can ask you maybe just to send us an email on that. All right, then budget format the same for the medium grants as the small technical grants. So the budget format for the medium grant, we will only give you that if you are invited to a full proposal. So that is not available yet. As Jean-Paul was saying, at this stage, it's a concept stage. So we're just looking for a rough figure of how much you are going to be asking for. And the small technical grants, the budget for that is available. In principle, the templates are similar, but they won't be quite the same. So please do not use the small technical grants template for the medium grant. We will, if you are invited, once your concept is accepted in the second phase, there will be a full budget to be done, and we will share the relevant template at that point. Okay, I hope that's clear.
Christine, there's a
Yes.
question about the letters of support, and I'm wondering whether you could answer that one, because it might be relevant for other participants as well. Whether the letter of
Yes.
support needs to be
Yeah.
coming from,
I see that. I was getting to that. Thank you. Okay, so yes, the park authority should be fine. If I'm assuming you're meaning the National Parks Authority, that is authorized entity working in that area. Or I don't know exactly which grant this is for. If it's for a small technical grant, yes, again, the National Parks Authority, a letter from them would be sufficient. The idea is what we're looking for here is really a formal authority in the country to be supportive of the proposal. Because, you know, what we want to avoid is just a random idea. This is what we think is needed in this, without the country actually carrying that. So it is about a formal authority in the country. It doesn't have to be the government specifically. In many countries, the park entities are parastatals or similar, but they have an authority over these areas. And so in that authority capacity, a letter from them would be sufficient too. I see another question about 3 years experience required on managing EU grants and grants related to thematic focus. The experience, the 3 years is around the relationship between the NGO and the CBO. So it's not necessarily asking for that experience in managing these grants. Obviously, the NGO that would be mentoring should have some experience with managing grants. Otherwise, the purpose of their engagement in the grant is not really fulfilled. But there's no specific requirement that you show experience with specifically grant management. There's no specific criteria on the size of the CBO. The requirement is that they are registered. So again, there's this question about an INGO and an NGO and a CBO. I think we responded to that in a similar way to what Ahmed was asking. The focus of the work is really on the work in the community managed areas. And so we really do want the funding and the work to be with the community-based organizations that are managing these areas. So I hope that answers your question as well, Ali Makio. Okay, so I think I'm going to wrap up now. There are still a few questions there, but if I can ask you, we have provided you with the email, I think, or if somebody can just pop the BioPharma ISA email into the chat, please. I would request that anybody that feels their question has not yet been answered to just email us and ask your question again. And in some cases, a short call might be necessary. Thank you, Roxana. A short call might be necessary just to better understand what you're asking, but yes. So Roxana has put the email address into the chat, and I would request that anybody that hasn't been answered emails us, but also please have a read through the guidelines. There is a lot of detail in the guidelines, and thank you, Roxana. She's just posted the guideline link as well in the chat. Please read the guidelines carefully, and if after this call and the questions we've answered, as well as looking through the guidelines in detail, you still have questions, then please feel free to email us again on your questions. And with that, I would like to close the call today. We have a French session coming up in just under half an hour. So any of you that are French speaking and would like to hear all of this again in French, you're also very welcome to join us again. It will be the same information. but it might be that some of you are more comfortable and will understand better in your mother tongue, if that's French. And so then please feel free to join us in the French session starting at 12 o'clock South African time, which is in just under half an hour. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us. And we look forward to hearing from you and receiving your proposals later in the month. Thank you very much. I will now.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.